Are you recording now? All right. So welcome back, listeners, to the Inebri-art podcast. We're just going to record our quick little advert here because, again, we have a sponsor. We are super happy to announce our sponsor for the month of June is Airship Notebooks. They have this really great quality sketchbook that you can purchase. You can go right to airshipnotebook.com and check out their products there. They gave us a whole stack of them to pass out at our life drawing event at the beginning of this month, and all our people were very appreciative. They, I mean, come on, you show up at a life drawing, you get a free sketchbook. How bad's that? So check them out. I dig them, and so thank you again to Airship Notebook. Make sure you go to airshipnotebook.com. Let them know that you heard them on the Inebri-art podcast, and so thank you guys for listening, and here's the episode. All right, welcome back, listeners, to the Inebri-art podcast. We are back at the Craft Beer Cellar on Main Street in Plymouth, one of our favorite places to record, in their little basement classroom here. If you happen to be in Plymouth, make sure you check out the selection of beers from all over the world. And they also now have a new Bay State Brewery Tours where you can come here, sign up, and hop on their... They have like a little short bus, for lack of a better term, where they can take you around to local breweries and you can sample the beer at local breweries and get a tour. And I believe you can find that at baystatebrewtours.com. And we are here today with Linda Mackey.
That's correct.
See, I always get last names wrong. Who is an artist. Now, how would you describe yourself? You're a fairly unusual artist because you work in textiles, not in paint or drawing implements. So how would you describe your artwork?
Well, first I want to thank you for inviting me on this.
Oh, sure, no problem.
Feel honored to be asked to do this. I actually describe myself as a mixed media fiber artist.
Okay.
And the reason is because I combined several different fiber techniques together. And so that's hence the mixed media term. Right. So I combine deconstructive screen printing, which is similar to monoprinting.
Okay.
I can describe in detail what that is, with Shibori hand dyeing, which is...
Okay. I don't know what that is.
Shibori hand dyeing is a old traditional Japanese technique, which is sort of a... it's kind of like tie-dye, but a more elegant and more elaborate version of tie-dye. Yeah. And then I combine that with Nuno felting, which is a felting technique where you felt into fabric.
Okay, so I'm familiar with felting, like where you can go to Michael's and pick up like the little gift pack, and it's usually geared more towards, preteens and whatnot to felt the teddy bear shape. But these aren't in shapes; these are flat.
Right.
Pieces.
This is all pictorial pieces that are made to look like paintings. So I essentially paint with, fabrics, yarn, wool, fabrics that I actually put color in and pattern in. So that's where the printing comes in, the deconstructed printing and the dyeing, the Shibori dyeing. So all my fabrics I get are white when I start, and then I...
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So they're definitely not white now. And a lot of the works that I've seen you do are kind of like landscapes. Is that predominantly what you tend to do? They're sort of kind of an abstract-y landscape. Yes. Impressionistic, that's probably the better word.
Right, yeah. I'm really drawn to, patterns and surfaces in nature and textures. And I like to combine them. I'm really fascinated by... layers upon layers, and what happens when things are, in nature, when things decompose or change or something, like leaves decomposing and then the layers of other leaves on top of that, and then more leaves and what happens underneath and how that changes. So my art is similar to that. I like to have layers, and I like to combine different things and see how they interplay and how they react to each other, and what the outcome is.
So you mentioned Shibori.
Shibori.
Shibori dyeing. What is that exactly?
That is it's a Japanese technique that started like eons ago, and mostly it was indigo dye when they first did it. But basically, it's where you take fabric and you tie it up, you bind it, you sew and pull and gather.
Okay.
Sometimes you'll wrap around a pole. A lot of times I'll have like a PVC pole. Back in traditional time, they used
bamboo or something.
Bamboo or wooden, and then you scrunch up the fabric and whatever it's like a resist technique. So however you tie it or clamp it or bind it or wrap it, that's the pattern that you'll get. Right.
So those areas stay white, and then the dye would go to the other areas.
Right.
Now, what kind of dye do you use for that? Is it a specific dye, or is it just kind of?
I use a cold water dye just because it is a chemical dye. It's not a natural dye. I use it because it's just easiest to use in my house because modern time plumbing and stuff like that. Yeah. So, and it's really pretty permanent. It's pretty wash resistant and fade resistant. So, I have to be careful. Obviously, anybody who's an artist knows that the materials you use, you have to be careful.
Oh yeah, there's no healthy art.
I know. No.
And then you always. You probably don't get it when you're dyeing, but when you're painting, you're bound to drink out of your brush water at least once. So it's not good for you.
Now the felting technique is really different than what you see like at Michael's because it's a wet technique. There's two different kinds of felting. One's dry, which is needle.
You kind of like poke the two to kind of combine them. Okay.
I do the wet, so I pile everything. Like I lay everything out, and usually it's double what it ends up being because when you wet it with soapy water, you want it to shrink and kind of melt into each other and become like knotted together and matted together. So it'll shrink. It shrinks probably about 30 to 40%.
Oh, wow.
So the pieces start out much bigger.
Yeah. So there's no glue that holds these together?
No
it's
glue.
Just kind of the natural friction or natural adherence?
No glue. I mean, some of it I sew. I will sew. Like some of my pieces I'll sew on. And you can see there's a lot of, when I sew, I use the thread like you would drawing. So I have this fancy little foot that you put on your machine that allows you to just go in any direction you want. So you can literally draw it with a sewing machine.
Oh, that's interesting. So you use a sewing machine. You don't even do it by hand.
No, I just draw with the sewing machine. Like I sign my name. I can draw.
You can sign your name with the sewing machine?
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. I don't feel like I could do that.
You just draw with it. Some of them, like this doesn't have, this piece right here that you're looking at, doesn't have any embroidering on it, sewing, but like this one does, has a lot. And this one has a little bit. So it depends. I like mixing and matching and kind of figuring out what more I want to add to layer on top.
Do you add paint on top? Like after you dye it, do you ever like go back in and paint on top of it? Or?
I will sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes I do with textile paints.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or dyes that are thickened.
Okay.
I use a lot of dyes that are thickened.
So you kind of like almost don't mix it correctly, like more dye, less water kind of thing, or?
Well, not really. It's a little. It's like it's a seaweed mixture that makes it thick.
Oh, okay.
It's made out of seaweed paste. And because I don't want to dilute the color, I want the color to stay the same, but I want the dye to be thick so it doesn't just run
everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. But the reason I use dye is because paint. When you paint on fabric, it changes the weight of the fabric because it sits on top.
Yeah.
Paint sits on top. Dyes embed into the fabric. It becomes part of the fabric.
Yeah. I actually, at the time, it sounded like a cool idea. It turned out not to be so much fun, but my sister does cross-stitch. And so I'm like, can you paint on that stuff? And she's like, sure. And I'm like, cool, let's do a piece together, and there was a Johnny Cash themed show coming up, and she stitched Johnny Cash's silhouette, and then I painted Folsom Prison kind of in the negative space.
Yeah.
And it was horrible. I hated it because it didn't soak in, and then when it did soak in, it just kind of bled everywhere. Mm-hmm. Live and learn.
Yes, dyes would have been beautiful.
Yeah.
Because you could have thickened them, and then what happens is when you thicken the dyes with the seaweed paste mixture, it washes out, but the dyes are all and then the dyes have a real soft and muted, and they blend in with the fabric and everything.
Yeah, I felt like the paint didn't soak in at all. Like it just kind of sat, and if you watered it down, it was like exactly like you said it's very faded and so.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Your stuff definitely has a very like watercolory feel to it. Did you always work in textiles, or did you start off in something else and move?
Well, I've always done a lot of textiles, even from when I was a child. My mother was a seamstress. She made wedding gowns, and so I would help her sew all the time. And then my grandmother taught me knitting and quilting, so I've done all the traditional,
Yeah.
But when I went to school, I was an art and psychology major.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Emmanuel College.
Okay.
That was my undergraduate. But I really was fascinated with weaving and textile design. So the art I did was textile design and dyeing and weaving. So I first started out just doing a lot of accessories and clothing. Stuff, because that's where I was trained to be.
Like purses and that kind of stuff?
Purses, scarves, jackets. So I did tons of that. And I did the whole circuit when I was raising my children. I would have weekends where I would do all the craft shows.
Yeah,
I did that big time, all over. New York, Maine.
Oh, wow.
I did all those,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's tough. I feel like...
It was hard work.
Yeah, I've known a few people do craft shows, and I feel like I've never known anyone to travel that much doing it, but it seems very hit or miss. Yeah,
it was very hit or miss.
That, yeah.
But for a while there in the the late 80s, it was pretty lucrative. People they would buy my stuff, and so it was,
Do you feel like online killed that some? With the dawn of the internet, it's a lot easier to find stuff?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. I don't know. I haven't done shows in a long time now, so I'm not sure how it is now.
Yeah.
But then I went back to school, and I got my master's in art therapy.
Okay.
So I became an art therapist and had my own practice. And
so what exactly is art therapy?
Art therapy is using art in counseling.
Okay.
Helping people who have behavioral health disorders. So my specialty was very young children, 3 to 10.
So do you use kind of their art to try and interpret the issues that they're having? And that kind of... Okay.
And use art to help them sort of process things on their own also, and to cope, get through things. So my specialty was young children who came from with serious mental health issues, like they were hospitalized, and so I was doctors would refer to me, and I would see children with bipolar or some serious, anxiety issues or things like that. So I did that for a long time, maybe about 18 years.
Wow. Okay.
So while I was doing that, I did a little bit of art, but it was mostly, the shows here and there and stuff like that. And so I retired from that in 2013. Yeah. And then I started doing this full time.
Oh, nice.
And I left the accessory and that whole world.
So now it's just these
Now I'm just doing it for myself, really.
Nice, that's awesome.
And I'm now looking to see if maybe I can start getting them in galleries. I haven't really done too much of that.
Well, you hung an art show.
I did, and I have been doing art shows, and I've been doing well. Like, I am a member of the Plymouth Guild.
Yeah.
And actually, the last 3 years, I've won prizes. This last year, I think I made second place. The year before that was honorable mention, then first place.
That's a tough show. They get a lot of submissions. I helped, was it at the end of last summer? It was right before the art show we had. And I'm really glad that I did help out because I learned a lot just in that one afternoon. But I couldn't believe the number of pieces they had submitted. And,
get a lot.
Yeah, and from all over. And I think they said they maybe hang a third of them.
Yeah.
And the rest are just, thank
Right.
you, but we're not putting it up.
They don't. I know.
For obvious reasons. I mean, you can't hang everything.
You can't. No.
Yeah.
I guess I have my little niche here because it's really it's good and bad because sometimes they don't know what to. I'll submit my pieces in other art shows and they don't know where to put me.
Right.
Because it's like they consider this craft.
Right. It's not painting,
But it's not
it's
really-
not drawing, and it's like, what is it?
So sometimes it's great. Some
Yeah.
shows they love it and they know where to put me, and I usually win a prize because it's pretty advanced.
It's very unique too.
Yeah. And then other shows they don't get it at all and they don't even accept me. They're like, I don't know what this is,
Yeah.
So it's hit or miss.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So where else have you hung other than the Artist Guild? Have you?
Well, I often go to Florida in the winter. I go there for a couple of months to get away from the cold.
Is that where you just came back from? I know you just were.
Well, I
out.
was in Portugal. After that, I went to Portugal.
Geez.
I like
Nice.
to travel,
I
get
guess
away
so.
from. Yeah. And so I go to. I'm in Naples. So there's a couple of galleries in Naples, Florida, and there's
cool.
one on Sanibel Island that I've exhibited in. So I do a lot of work down there.
Yeah.
A studio down there too.
So where you travel so much, do you find a lot of inspiration when you're traveling, or do you?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
where do you take pictures and then kind of work with those scenes in mind, or?
Yeah, I do. I take a lot of pictures, and then what I'll do with the pictures is sometimes I'll just use a program and funkify them, I don't know if that's a word or not.
Sure.
And other times I'll just do a drawing from a picture.
Yep.
I keep a journal. I don't know if a lot of other artists do that, but an avid
I mean,
visual journalist.
Yeah, most artists at least carry a sketchbook of some
Yeah,
kind.
I mean, everywhere I go, I keep a journal, and that a lot of that is from my art therapy training too. I always made my kids keep journals,
Keep journals,
visual journals,
visual journals.
Yeah, they always would say, I can't write things down. My parents will read what I, the young ones, they'll read what and I said, just draw it then.
Yeah.
They won't know.
Right, it'll mean something to you, but it may not mean anything to them.
So I do the same thing, and I'll often use those, my journal as inspiration.
Yeah. I recently had my kids on the podcast, and my daughter said, I don't remember exactly how it came up, but she said that she has to draw things to get them out of her head because she has an overactive imagination. And I'm like, yeah, it's you're expressing yourself and kind of getting your thoughts on paper. And
that's so healthy. It's
oh,
great
yeah,
she's
like
doing that.
once you kind of get them out of your head, then
yeah.
I think you can
They're
kinda,
not so scary
Right,
anymore.
yeah. So, visual journals, sketchbooks, I always try to encourage people to.
Yeah, and photography is really great now too, especially with all the new programs that they have out. Especially, I'm not like the greatest photographer, I don't think, but I do have a good eye, and so then I can just make it look like it's not a photo anymore, like
Right.
with those programs. You
And
can just make
it's so much more accessible to everybody now because everyone has a camera in their pocket, and you can get some decent, inexpensive, or free software to kind of tweak them, and everyone's got a computer, so
right.
The days of having a dark room and whatnot are over.
Yeah.
So that's
Really, it's great.
I think you see a lot more people into it.
When I was in Portugal, I was in this city called Porto, and it's really up and coming, and went through some really, really rough times in the 90s, like very dilapidated buildings, and everything is starting to come back now because a lot of tourists want to come there.
Yeah.
If you ever, it's amazing there. So, but I was fascinated by the buildings because they just let them decay, but they were so intriguing. So I have a lot of photos of these old peeling paints, and then underneath, and then murals that people painted on top of the peels, but then they're peeling, and then other murals that were painted. Just
Well, that
layer
seems
upon
kind
layer.
of indicative of your artwork, and
Yeah.
those kind of layers and decomposition. And,
So
yeah.
we'll see. Maybe I might turn into more urban-looking things, but
That'd be interesting. Yeah.
You don't know. You got to go where
and
it leads you, right?
I think every artist kind of goes through phases where you can kind of see, like, oh, they did this for 2 years, and then they kind of started with something else, and I think that's kind of normal because we get bored,
yeah,
frankly.
yeah.
So where else do you get inspiration from?
Mostly just looking out in the world and seeing what I see.
Yeah.
Mostly being influenced by what I see rather than my emotions. I've been trying to be more abstract, as you can see, my last series that I've been working on. I did a whole series of these when I was in Florida over this past winter. And I forced myself to work. This was I forced myself to work very fast. Within printing, like within an hour, like 15 minutes here, 15 minutes here, really quickly.
Yeah.
So you can't think too much.
Right, yeah.
And also making things up out of your head and not using anything.
Not using any reference.
Yeah.
It can be very difficult sometimes.
That's really...
It's always... The hardest thing is getting the vision out of your head the way you see it.
Yeah.
So
some of them were successful. This was one of I feel was one of us successful. It looks like a landscape, though, so I'm still not...
It does.
I'm still not totally there. You can see where I need to go, but... It's hard when you're used to working a certain way and to get out of that.
And you have a definite kind of color palette. You seem to, and I've seen some of your work, but I haven't seen a ton. But you seem to work very in cool colors. And do you think that's kind of like just kind of the phase you're in, or
could be?
Yeah,
probably is.
So the material you work with specifically, you said when you get it, it's white. What is it specifically that you...
Well, the fabrics are all white. So there's silk and cotton. That's all. I work with natural fabrics because the dyes I use have to be natural fabrics.
And you just get these at, like, Michael's? Or
No, it's all online.
Online?
Yeah, because it has to be 100% silk and 100% cotton. It's hard to find those in local fabric stores.
Yeah.
They're usually a blend. Mix.
Oh, right, yeah, sure.
And the dyes won't take then. So I buy them online, and it's the same with the wool. It's called roving.
Okay.
Now, if you're familiar with wool that's raw, that hasn't been spun, it looks like cotton balls. So I get merino wool, because that's the best, easiest to felt.
Okay.
And I do get the merino wool dyed. So I don't dye that because that's a more complicated process to dye wool. You have to use an acid dye, and it's pretty...
That sounds
dangerous to
more caustic than...
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So I will go online and buy, they're called bats of wool that's just raw. Yeah. And it looks like cotton balls. And so when I paint with the wool, I just pull it apart and lay it wherever I want.
And then so is it just... It amazes me that there's no adhesive. No. So it's just... water that you put on.
So then these are pieces of fabric that I'll throw down, and then wool around it or wool underneath.
Do you press them, or like how does it stay together?
So what happens is I put a piece of plastic down because it's going to be wet on my work table, and then I'll just lay fabrics down, or I'll lay wool down, and then I'll add different These are like. Pieces of yarn, that I just lay down, and these are cut up fabrics there, and usually it's about this thick because it's puffy.
So that would be about an inch thick.
It's about an inch thick. Yep. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I do it all the time.
So it's about an inch thick, and it's bigger. So it's bigger, and then I wet it down very carefully so I don't mess up.
Right, so you don't move anything around.
Like little soapy water.
Yeah.
Then it presses down. And then I cover it with plastic, right? And then I agitate it, I roll it up, and the way you felt is with friction and motion.
Okay.
Because what happens is, it's fascinating what wool will do. When you wet it with soapy water, and you just move it, and the soapy water causes the fibers to sort of, because wool fibers are kind of curly and kinky, and the soapy water makes them kind of be more straight. Yeah. And then when you're moving it, they kind of intermix with everything. So
it's like Velcro.
And the fabric has holes in it because it's not tightly woven fabric; it's very loosely woven, and so the fibers will work their way into the fabric while you're moving because it's straight.
That's amazing.
And then when I feel that it gets to a certain point where I want it to start shrinking and really crinkle up and really stick, it's sort of like dreadlocks, you know, like somebody.
Yeah.
Kind of. That's. I'll make it. I'll like put hot water on it, and I want it to shrink up.
Yeah. Do you have a website where people can go and check this out?
Of me doing it?
No, just of your work in general.
Oh, yes, I do. I have a website with a lot of my artwork. It's linda-mackey.com.
Okay, excellent. We'll put a link in the description because it's fascinating because the way that it looks like you took a piece of fabric and painted on it. Because it's the pieces are so well adhered to each other that it almost looks like one piece.
Yeah. Well, some of them like that. This one is all felted. Mm-hmm. This particular one here that you're looking at there is a piece underneath of cotton that I did the screen printing on. Okay. And then I felted these separate pieces that I then embroidered on. Okay. So it's
you said you did some deconstructed screen printing?
Deconstructed.
So what do you mean by deconstruct? I know what screen printing is.
Yeah, now deconstructed screen printing is pretty fascinating. I learned it from a woman who sort of invented it. Her name is Kerr Gabrowski. Okay. She's from Mississippi. And basically what it is, it's like sort of the reverse of what normal screen printing is. So what you do is when you're making your screen, you're using thickened dyes. I use thickened dyes. And you're sort of putting all this stuff on a board that's very textural, and you're taking like an imprint of it with the thickened dyes on the screen. And you're letting the dyes sit on the screen and dry up, just cake up and dry, like you would dry paint. And it just dries on the screen. And then after it's nice and dry, you take it to your piece of fabric and you wet it out with a squeegee. And then it wets the dried up dye and makes an imprint on the fabric every time you pass it through. Yeah. But every time you pass it through, it's a different print. So it kind of looks like a monoprint because depending on how much you wet it out or how thick the dye is or how thin it is, some of it won't print. And it's got to have a limited lifespan. And it has a limited lifespan.
The more you use it, the more dye that's coming out of it.
So it's very fascinating technique.
That's interesting. I never heard of that.
Yeah.
So, are you a music fan?
I am a music fan.
I asked that because I know you take part in the Spire Performing Arts Center. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the Spire is a great venue. It's in a historic church
here on Main Street in Plymouth.
Main Street, and it has a real diverse mix of music and concerts and theater too. Anywhere from folk to jazz to pop to rock to country and Americana. I mean, it has all kinds of, and they're always looking to expand even more interesting types of art, music. And then they have theater too. So, and it's a lot of it, there's a lot of local artists for openers, but they're really trying to pull in a lot of big names too.
We had a band that participated in the open mic competition.
Oh yeah.
We had Toast.
I haven't heard of them. Toast.
Their average age is like 16. Bunch of teenage kids.
That sounds
from
awesome.
The conservatory. They were great.
That's the kind of stuff the Spire really likes to do.
So they were very cool, and I think there's an open mic kind of ongoing there now. Isn't there on Thursdays?
Yeah, and there's also a jazz open mic too.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is really incredible. I tell you, I never really had an appreciation of jazz as much as I do now. But you go to the jazz that is run by Johnny Souza, and he's a jazz musician himself.
Johnny Souza.
He's local.
I feel like I know that name.
Yeah, he plays the trumpet.
And I think people have told me about him. I think that might be it.
He's a Berkeley. Student, passed a long time ago. So he has that connection with a lot of Berkeley graduates that graduated from there, and they're very famous jazz musicians that play all over the world. And he'll get them to come and play at the Spire, and it's just amazing to hear the music that comes from.
What's your favorite thing that you've seen there?
I think I really liked Liz Longley. I don't know if you know. She's a sort of a folk up-and-coming folk singer, indie folk. She's from the area, Boston area. Really liked her. I think the local artists I really enjoy. The new up-and-coming. I mean, I saw Shawn Colvin, and I love her. She's another...
I think I've heard of her.
Yeah, she's another icon. But I just saw Session Americana. They were amazing.
I don't know who they are either.
They're probably not well known either.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're from the area. I don't remember that, but they were...
but it seems like there's always something going on
There's always something really,
And they do an annual big, like, Beatles thing. Like a day-long festival type of... I don't know if festival is the right word.
That's very popular. I think the popular... what's the band? The popular band that likes to... It's a local band. Oh, dear. I'm having a brain.
Local band.
Yeah, that plays here in Plymouth, and they play a lot of the Beatles songs.
Oh, I'm not sure.
It'll come to me, but maybe...
Is it like a Beatles type of name?
No.
No. I know Jake Hill plays there.
Yeah, Jake plays there once in a while.
Former podcast guest.
Yeah.
I think he was like episode 2 or 3, something like that. 2? 3? One of those. They brought us snacks.
They have a theater there, too, and the theater last year was really great.
They've actually reached out to us to be on the podcast. Is it like American Theater or something? Something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've spoken with them via email and trying to get them on the podcast.
Yeah, I think they're there during the whole month of July, I think.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that's more or less how we met.
Right, it is.
Someone forwarded me, I think, a Facebook post that you put up about looking for people to help hang artwork there.
They want to support all arts, not just musical. I mean, they really would theater. They would love to be able to have some even dance going on there. They haven't quite figured out how to, if there's anybody interested in that.
Kind of like performing on stage and people watching?
Yeah.
Like a ballet type thing? Okay.
But, they just play with a lot of anything. They're really interested in just having all kinds of arts there.
Yeah.
So they're in the lobby. We really would like to have some visual art.
Yeah, and it's coming June. We said
it's going to come. We're working towards it.
So this will be going up. This will probably be going up in June. So go by and check out the artwork that we just hung up. It's beautiful.
It's going to be great. Yeah. I know it's going to be. I think it'll be. People will really like having it there too.
Oh, I think definitely. Feature. Yeah, it'll give them kind of something to talk about during intermissions and beforehand, because there's that nice little, that area behind the seating.
Right. Yeah.
It's a great place to see a show.
Yeah, and every seat is great.
Yeah.
The sound is amazing. It gets better and better, I tell you.
And honestly, when I first went there, because it's an old church, and so the seating is pews, and I thought it was going to be super uncomfortable, but it wasn't at all.
We have cushions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really thought it was great, and I'm looking forward to going to see more shows there. And I'm assuming there's a website for that too. I'm assuming Spire something.
I should know that.
Google the Spire in Plymouth, and
it's spirecenter.org.
I think that sounds right.
Yeah, and I'm hoping to have maybe a show of my own there. Myself, I have a sister-in-law that's she's a quilter, and she does some amazing quilts. And we were talking maybe we would actually do quilts and my pieces, because we complement each other quite nicely. And so maybe down the road I'll be there too.
Nice.
Someday.
Yeah. It's always, and like we were saying earlier, people are always interested in finding places to put up their artwork, and so that's, I think.
And there's so much great art here.
Plymouth is amazing. I feel like there's so much going on here right now, and like every day something new.
I know, it's become
pops
a really
up.
Cool place, hasn't it?
I was talking to Fish earlier. I got a phone call from a radio station yesterday afternoon, and what started off as kind of just a basic, like, oh, this is what we need kind of thing, turned into, oh, why don't you come down and tour the station? And I'm like, sure, why not? Well, so it's, I feel like if you get out in Plymouth and you are looking for something creative, either music or arts or whatever, there's just so many people down here just trying to do the same type of thing.
There is.
So
Yeah, there is.
it's I find it very exciting.
And the food is getting better too. The restaurants, food, and
so where's your favorite restaurant?
Well, I'll tell you, the Tasty's great.
Oh my God, so good! I was
really
there
like
last 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I think that might be my favorite right now.
That's really good.
Yeah, it really was good.
We do a lot of work with the New World Tavern, so I'll plug them. But the Blue Eyed Crab's great too.
Oh yeah, I haven't been there in a while. I just thought of the name Third Left.
Third Left.
Plays
Yeah,
the
that's
Beatles.
The Phase.
Phase, the one who didn't show up for the podcast.
Yes, yeah. So, are you familiar with the Faye family?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I wasn't. And Carl's like, "Oh, you should have the." Carl is the owner of the New World Tavern. He's like, "Oh, you have to have the Fays on." I'm like, "I don't know what that is." And he's like, "Oh, it's this family, and they're all musically inclined, and one of them's, I think, the drummer in Third Left. I think. Yep. And so we had. Oh God, I'm so terrible with names. Chris Faye.
Yes.
Sheila.
Doesn't count because we knew before.
It's a name that I remember. Mal.
I don't know them all.
They
but
look.
They all play.
Yeah,
It's uncanny how much the two daughters look alike to the point where Sheila works here, and then Mal, the sister came in. And it's like, oh, Sheila's. Oh, that's not Sheila.
Yeah. And but what a great group.
Yeah, and
they were so much fun.
They play the Beatles songs. They make them their own, though. It's not like I want to sound like the Beatles.
Right, so they put their own twist on it.
They put their own and they're awesome.
That's
they're
awesome.
so great, and they sell out the place. So
they're very popular around here. They're
so hopefully we'll have the Beatles again, and you'll have to come and.
Oh, absolutely!
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
We're going to try and get the Third Left on too. We have a list of people we're trying to get on. Let's see, what else are we doing? So you got your favorite restaurant. That's the important thing.
Yes.
And we talked about music. Like, what else? Where else do you find inspiration in books? TV, movies. Like, what do you do when you're not felting?
Well, I have a little cottage, like a little guest house that I rent out.
Okay.
That's what I do.
Like an Airbnb type thing?
Yes, I have
cool.
Airbnb, and I'm on TripAdvisor too.
Oh.
So, and I love to bake, so I'm an avid baker.
Nice.
I'm really good too.
Yeah.
So I bake a lot for my guests, and I get busy. I just started last week. I have guests there for 2 weeks.
This got to just be picking up, right?
It's just, and I'm not fully booked in May, but I'm all the way already booked June, July, August.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me around here. I'm assuming it's nearby.
It's attached to my house, which is nearby in Plymouth,
yeah.
And so it's really popular, and I meet the nicest people.
Do you ever have any, nightmares?
No, I really haven't. Because I've had some, quirky people that I had this one couple, and she rearranged the whole apartment. I mean, it's a whole apartment. This is an in-law apartment that I made for my parents.
Was it bad feng shui?
I don't know why she did it, but it was. When she left, I went in there and I was like, oh, and it was kind of uncanny because I didn't know where everything was, and usually I go in to check so I can give back their refund.
Right. So then you had to kind of set it back the way it was.
Where is everything?
Yeah.
It's like she moved everything around, my furniture and everything. I mean, everything.
Yeah.
Did you like it?
Not really, no.
No, now she moved it back.
I moved it back. Some of the on the hutch, this little dining hutch, she moved some of the, the vases and the china and stuff, and that was okay.
Yeah.
And I left some of that, but.
Do you hang your own artwork in your Airbnb?
I do have a little gallery in there, and I do sell.
Yeah, nice.
Yes,
that's a good idea. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, I do. And it's been really, really. I've been doing it for maybe my 4th year.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I started doing my art. I started doing that after
cool.
I retired, and I'm really enjoying it, and I'll keep doing it. I mean, it's hard work because I do the cleaning, the booking, the baking, and some people can be very needy.
Yeah.
I'll have some people. They'll text me everything they do. We're going in Boston. I'm like,
I don't care.
I'm like, okay, and I'll be really nice. Yeah. Well, that's nice. Yeah. Have a great day.
Have fun. Have you met anyone that you've stayed in contact with?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
That's really interesting.
Lots of people. And I have 3 repeats that have come all the time. They've come.
Yeah.
One is now, and then I have one coming for a whole month in July. That's a repeat. So I have 3 repeats that
That's
keep
pretty
coming
cool.
back. So
Yeah.
it's kind of nice.
Nice.
I like those a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's when at least you know what to expect. And
I know.
You're not gonna have to rearrange their rearrangement.
Yeah. My husband's getting used to it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's it's attached to my house, so it's you have to be, we try to be quiet. We don't want to be,
Right,
'cause we want
right.
to make the experience nice for them. So,
Right.
My husband, he's a musician himself, and so sometimes he wants to crank the music up, but it's like, you don't know
right,
until you
yeah.
get to know the person, like
Right.
whether you should crank the music
up.
Yeah.
And I believe he's also a lobster sponsor.
He is. Yes, he is.
So for our listeners who haven't heard already, because I believe early on when we started this, I was just finishing my lobster. It was just going up. In Plymouth, they call it the lobster crawl. There's 30 some odd fiberglass lobsters all over town, painted by different artists. How's he found that? Like, is he enjoying having his lobster? Because that's out in front of his business.
Yes.
Is he getting a lot of positive feedback? And
I think so. It was rough in the beginning because he had some damage and theft, which we all know.
Yep, there's
and
been
he had a theft of his lobster has a
crutch or
crutch
something,
and
right?
it was taken,
Yeah.
but then it was magically returned. So, which but that's all ironed itself out,
right?
But it was in the beginning. I think that was.
Mine's got some damage to it, but I think it's just kind of incidental. I was down looking at it, and because mine has this like rope that wraps around it, and it looks like someone may have like tugged on it, and some of the screws came out.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, they're outside. They're gonna get roughed up.
Right. But he's happy with him.
That's cool.
We love supporting that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Were you upset that he didn't pick you to paint it? I mean, being an artist, he didn't.
He actually, no, he mentioned it to me.
Yeah.
At the time, I was too busy. So,
Yeah.
And you learn to stay away from that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
because-
yeah. It was one of those. Like again, someone sent me a message, and I put in for it. And my sponsors were Wood Seafood and Plymouth Cruise Line, Plymouth Cruises, yeah. And so then I got the lobster, and people were like, "Well, how are you going to do it?" I'm like, "I don't know. I have no idea how to do any of this." And so a lot of it is learning on the fly. Yeah,
yeah. They all came out so great.
Yeah, it was.
Yours too.
It was.
It's just, they're so colorful and just bring a lot of character into the town.
Yeah, and I think it's bringing a lot of people down. I got one like maybe last week. Friends will be down in Plymouth, or even they live here and they just happen to be down by the water, and they'll take a picture and text it to me or put it on Facebook, and it's just a cool thing going on.
Yeah.
So what are your plans coming up on the 400th anniversary of Plymouth? Are you gonna trying and getting your art out there for that in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, I think I will. I'm
yeah.
trying to get my art more out there. It's hard, when you're an artist to do it all, and a lot of us are stuck. We're not good at obviously marketing our work.
It's a tough. That's a very difficult thing for artists.
It.
Yeah,
and what happens is marketing gets in the way, and it kind of cuts into your creativity when you have to be a business person.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, and all the arts, not just visual.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So, but I'm trying to push myself towards that, to try to get in there and get into some some galleries that might want to.
Yeah, I feel like there's gonna be a lot of stuff going on down. During around that time.
Yeah,
so.
I think so.
Cool.
I think it'll be a great time for the arts for Plymouth.
Yeah, awesome. So since you're here and you are an artist, this month we are sponsored by Airship Notebooks. They make these great sketchbooks, so we have a sketchbook for you.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you to our sponsor, Airship Notebook, for sponsoring us. Make sure you check them out online.
I will.
And for our regular listeners, I always plug our life drawing the first Monday of every month at the New World Tavern. Around 7 o'clock, we bring in a model. There's an $8 cover charge. You bring whatever you want to work in, and we run it like a life drawing class. We start off with short poses, work all the way through to long poses. And that's been really gaining some steam. Our last one had 30-ish, so it's getting pretty packed in there. So come early.
That's exciting, yeah.
And now with sponsors, we're having some giveaways. So come early, get your seat, get something for free. Hopefully, if we have a sponsor for next month, which we haven't lined up yet. But so thank you, Linda, for coming down and talking to us.
Thank you for inviting me.
No problem.
I feel honored and...
Don't feel honored. We're not that big.
I feel like I'm like a real artist now. Interviewed.
And so we'll get to hanging stuff at the Spire so our listeners can get down there and check it out.
Yes, please do.
Yes, awesome.
Thank you again.
Thank you.